While picking up her blind daughter from school, the mother instantly noticed her slumped shoulders and defeated posture. Usually so thriving and independent, her daughter now walked hesitantly beside her guide dog, a shadow of her former self. Sensing that something was terribly wrong and trusting her instincts, the worried mother made the bold decision to strap a hidden camera to her daughter's guide dog. When she finally viewed the footage, she froze in horror at what she witnessed and immediately called 911. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. Clara Davis sat in her car, parked in the school lot, her eyes fixed on the digital display of her watch. The numbers blinked to 4 p.m., and she let out a small sigh. Her daughter, Erin, should be finishing her extra class right about now. Clara's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel as she contemplated the recent changes in their lives. The new government program supporting children with special needs had been implemented just a few weeks ago. For Erin, who was born blind due to retinopathy of prematurity, it meant extra classes to help her learn Braille writing and reading. Clara's heart swelled with a mixture of hope and anxiety. She wanted nothing more than for her daughter to have every opportunity to thrive, but she couldn't help worrying about how Erin was adjusting to the longer school days. Deciding to stretch her legs, Clara switched off the engine and stepped out of the car. The late afternoon sun warmed her face as she made her way to the school entrance. The air was filled with the distant sounds of children's laughter and the occasional bark of a dog, probably from the nearby park. As she approached the glass doors, they swung open, releasing a trickle of students. Some were clearly part of the special needs program, while others were regular students who had stayed late for various activities. Clara's eyes scanned the small crowd, searching for the familiar silhouette of her daughter. She found herself holding her breath, a habit she'd developed over the years whenever Erin was out of her sight. Then finally she spotted her. 10-year-old Erin appeared in the doorway, her guide dog Reuben leading the way. The golden retriever's harness caught the sunlight, a matching pair to Erin's flowing blonde hair. Erin wore her usual black glasses, a constant reminder of the challenges she faced. Clara's mind briefly flashed back to those terrifying weeks after Erin's premature birth at 28 weeks. The doctors had warned them about the possibility of complications, but nothing could have prepared them for the diagnosis and the subsequent loss of Erin's sight. "Erin, sweetheart, over here!" Clara called out, her voice carrying across the short distance between them. Erin's head turned towards the sound of her mother's voice. With Reuben's guidance, she made her way to Clara with practiced confidence. Over the years, Erin had learned to navigate her world with remarkable skill, using her other senses and the unwavering support of her guide dog. Clara enveloped her daughter in a warm hug. "How was school today, honey? Did you learn something new in your extra class?" To Clara's surprise, Erin simply replied, "It was okay." Clara blinked, taken aback. Normally, Erin would excitedly share details about her day, her lessons, her friends, the little things that made her happy. But today, her response was unusually short. Clara studied her daughter, noting the slight tension in her posture. Before she could press further, a familiar voice broke through the moment. "Good afternoon, parents." Clara turned to see Mr. Thomas Harris, Erin's extra-class teacher, stepping out of the school. He was a tall man with a friendly face, carrying a backpack and a document folder, looking as though he was heading home for the day. Clara had heard glowing recommendations about him from other parents, and so far she had no reason to doubt them. Still, with Erin acting differently, she found herself wondering if he might have some insight. "Mrs. Davis," Mr. Harris greeted her with a warm smile as he approached. "Lovely to see you." "Good to see you too, Mr. Harris," Clara replied. "I was just about to ask Erin how extra class went, but she hasn't told me much yet." Mr. Harris chuckled. She worked hard today. We've been making great progress. Erin is a very bright girl." Clara's shoulders relaxed slightly. "That's good to hear." "Today we focused on writing paragraphs in Braille," he continued. "She's getting faster, which is fantastic. It's important that she keeps practicing at home too." He gave Clara a knowing look. That means you and your husband should learn Braille as well, at least the basics. Clara nodded, appreciating his gentle encouragement. We've been trying. It's a bit of a learning curve, but we're working on it. She hesitated, then asked, And how is Erin doing socially? With her classmates? Do you notice anything amiss? Is everything okay? Mr. Harris paused for a moment before responding. She enjoys our lessons and seems to have fun learning, he said carefully. But outside of extra class, I don't see much of what happens. Clara's gaze shifted downward, her eyes widening slightly as she noticed Erin clinging to her leg. One of her small hands was buried in Reuben's fur, absent-mindedly stroking him for comfort. The golden retriever remained still, sensing his young handler's unease. Clara's concern deepened. That's actually why I asked. Erin's been acting a little off these past few days. The teacher considered her words before glancing down at Erin. We had a great lesson, didn't we, Erin? The girl hesitated for a long moment before nodding. Mr. Harris chuckled lightly, his voice taking on a playful tone. I couldn't hear you, Erin. Did we have fun today? Yes, Erin whispered, her voice barely audible. Clara's heart clenched at her daughter's subdued response. She forced a smile, trying to lighten the mood. She's probably just tired. It's been a long day, especially with the extra classes. Mr. Harris nodded in agreement. That's very possible. This new government program only started this month and the school is still adjusting, not only here but across the country. It'll take time for the students to get used to the schedule. It's perfectly normal. You're right, Clara agreed, feeling a mix of relief and lingering concern. We'll take it slowly. The most important thing is that Erin can keep up with her lessons and not fall behind. Exactly, Mr. Harris agreed. Rest assured, Mrs. Davis, I'm confident that Erin is doing all right. He turned to Erin and smiled. Keep up the good work, Erin. Clara glanced at her watch, realizing how late it was getting. Well, we should probably head home now. It's been a long day, and I'm sure both Erin and Reuben are hungry. As they were about to part ways, Mr. Harris suddenly remembered something. Oh, before you go, Mr. Harris said, a quick reminder. Tomorrow's extra class will be in the morning before regular school hours. I'm so sorry about that. I had to make an adjustment because of an afternoon commitment. This is only a one-time thing, and I wrote a note in Erin's agenda book, but I wanted to make sure you saw it. Thanks for the heads up, Clara said. I'll check the note when we get home. As they said their goodbyes, Mr. Harris reached out to pat Reuben. To everyone's surprise, the usually calm guide dog let out a low growl, followed by a sharp bark. Mr. Harris quickly withdrew his hand, looking startled. Clara apologized. I'm so sorry about that. Reuben isn't used to being petted by people outside the family. Mr. Harris laughed it off, though Clara noticed a slight edge to his voice. No worries at all. He's just being protective of Erin. That's a good thing. With final farewells exchanged, Clara guided Erin and Reuben to their car. She helped Erin into the back seat and made sure Reuben was settled. She pushed any anxious thought aside, chalking it up to the stress of adjusting to new routines. As Clara pulled out of the school parking lot, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The car hummed softly as they made their way through the familiar streets towards home. Through the rearview mirror, she could see Erin sitting quietly in the back seat, her hand resting on Reuben's head. The sight of her daughter's solemn face tugged at Clara's heart. Her thoughts drifted to Mr. Thomas Harris, the special education teacher they had met at last month's parent-teacher meeting. She remembered how impressed she had been by his credentials and reputation. Other mothers in the school community had nothing but praise for him, describing him as one of the best in the state at helping children with disabilities. His friendly demeanor and apparent dedication to his students had initially put Clara at ease. He seems so patient, Clara mused silently. The way he interacts with the children, it's clear he really knows how to connect with them individually. She recalled the confident way Mr. Harris had spoken about Erin's progress, the enthusiasm in his voice when discussing the learning strategies he employed. It was reassuring to know that Erin was in the hands of someone so well-regarded and experienced. We're lucky to have this opportunity for Erin, Clara thought. This program could really help her keep up with her peers. Yet as they drove, a small seed of doubt began to take root in Clara's mind. Erin's subdued behavior, so unlike her usual cheerful self, was troubling. Clara tried to rationalize it, telling herself that it was probably just the stress of adjusting to the new routine. After all, change was difficult for any child, let alone one facing the challenges Erin did. It's a big transition, Clara reminded herself. From a special needs school to a mainstream one, plus these extra classes. It's bound to be overwhelming at first. As they pulled into their driveway, Clara resolved to give Erin some time to settle into this new rhythm. She would keep a close eye on her daughter's mood and progress, but for now patience seemed the best approach. They entered the house and, to Clara's surprise, Erin headed straight for her room, Reuben faithfully at her side. She didn't even pause to take off her backpack, which was unusual for her meticulous daughter. "Erin, honey?" Clara called after her but received no response. Sighing, Clara decided to let Erin have some space. She's probably just tired, she reasoned. A little rest might do her good. Clara busied herself in the kitchen, refilling Reuben's water bowl and preparing a snack for him. As she worked, she made a mental note to check Erin's agenda later, remembering Mr. Harris's reminder about tomorrow's schedule change. Then, almost as an afterthought, she reached for Erin's favorite treat in the fridge, a strawberry chocolate pudding. It had always been a surefire way to lift her daughter's spirits in the past. Maybe it would work its magic again today. With the pudding in hand, Clara made her way to Erin's room. She knocked softly before entering, finding Erin stretched out on the bed, Reuben curled up beside her. The backpack lay discarded on the bed cover, a small detail that didn't escape Clara's notice. "I brought you your favorite pudding, sweetheart," Clara said gently, placing the treat on the bedside table. She then set down Reuben's water bowl and snack near the wall. Erin didn't respond, and Clara felt a pang of worry. This withdrawn behavior was so unlike her usually vibrant daughter. For a moment, Clara was tempted to press Erin for answers, to find out what was troubling her. But looking at Erin's tired face, she decided against it. Maybe she just needs some time, Clara thought. Instead, she picked up Erin's backpack. "I'm just going to check your agenda book, honey. Mr. Harris mentioned he left a note about tomorrow." As Clara flipped through the pink student agenda, she found the notes for the day. There was indeed a reminder about the early start for the extra class tomorrow, and the school bus will be dispatched early to accommodate, just as Mr. Harris had mentioned. But there was also another note, this one from Ms. Eleanor, Erin's regular classroom teacher, about a math test scheduled for tomorrow. Clara's brow furrowed slightly. It was a lot for one day, an early start and a test. No wonder Erin seemed overwhelmed. As she closed the agenda, Clara's resolve strengthened. She would do whatever it took to help Erin navigate these challenges. Clara gently closed the agenda book, her mind already formulating a plan to help Erin prepare for tomorrow's challenges. She turned back to the bed where Erin had shifted to a sitting position, her unseeing eyes directed towards the sound of her mother's movements. Reuben, ever attentive, had moved to his water bowl and was lapping up the cool liquid. "Erin, sweetie," Clara began softly, "I see you have a math test tomorrow. Would you like to go over the material together? We could do it now or maybe after dinner with Dad if you prefer." Erin's response surprised Clara. "Can we do it now?" "I'm not tired and I might be sleepy after dinner." Clara blinked, momentarily taken aback. She had been operating under the assumption that Erin's earlier mood was due to fatigue, but here was her daughter, ready and willing to study. It was a stark contrast to her behavior just moments ago. "Of course, honey," Clara replied, trying to keep the confusion out of her voice. "Let's settle in and get started." They positioned themselves comfortably on the bed, Clara with the math textbook open in her lap. As she put an arm around Erin to draw her closer, she felt her daughter flinch at the contact. Startled, Clara pulled back slightly. "Erin, did I hurt you?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "No," Erin mumbled, but when Clara tried to put her arm around her again, she flinched once more. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Clara pressed gently. "Did something happen at school? Is someone bothering you? Let me check your arm." Erin shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't want to be touched right now. Clara's heart clenched. This wasn't like Erin at all. Her daughter had always been affectionate, finding comfort in physical contact, especially given her reliance on touch to navigate the world. This sudden aversion was deeply troubling. Okay, I'm sorry, Clara said, trying to keep her voice steady. We don't have to sit so close. Let's just focus on the lesson, all right? But before Clara could open the book, Erin spoke again. Actually, Mum, I think I am tired after all. Can I study with Dad later tonight instead? Clara stared at her daughter, a mixture of confusion and worry washing over her. The rapid shifts in Erin's mood and behavior were becoming increasingly alarming. Something was clearly wrong, but Erin seemed unwilling or unable to express what it was. Of course, if that's what you want, Clara replied, closing the book and returning it to Erin's backpack. She watched as Erin lay back down, removing her glasses and placing them on the bedside table. Clara moved to the window, drawing the curtains to darken the room. As she did so, she glanced at the clock. 5:20 p.m. It was too early for Erin to be going to bed, but Clara decided not to push the issue. Whatever was troubling her daughter, forcing her to talk about it now might only make things worse. As she picked up the barely touched pudding and called for Reuben to follow her out, Clara's mind was racing. The mother in her wanted to demand answers, to fix whatever was wrong immediately. But the rational part of her knew that sometimes children needed space to process their emotions. Closing Erin's door softly behind her, Clara resolved to keep a closer eye on her daughter in the coming days. If this behavior persisted, she would need to dig deeper, perhaps even consider speaking with Erin's teachers or a counselor. For now, though, all she could do was wait and watch, hoping that Erin would open up when she was ready. The hours crept by in an unsettling quiet that blanketed the house. Clara busied herself with routine tasks, each movement punctuated by worried glances towards Erin's closed door. She had tended to Reuben, ensuring the loyal guide dog was clean, relieved, and comfortable. The familiar rituals of caring for Reuben provided a small measure of normalcy in an evening that felt increasingly off-kilter. As Clara moved through the kitchen, preparing dinner with mechanical precision, her mind kept circling back to Erin's unusual behavior. The sizzle of vegetables in the pan and the gentle bubbling of a simmering sauce formed a backdrop to her swirling thoughts. She found herself pausing occasionally, straining to hear any sound from Erin's room, but the silence remained unbroken. When dinner was finally ready, Clara stood at the foot of the stairs debating whether to wake Erin. The aroma of the freshly cooked meal wafted through the house, usually a surefire way to rouse her daughter's appetite. But as she ascended the stairs and gently pushed open Erin's door, the sight of her daughter's peaceful, sleeping form gave her pause. Erin lay curled on her side, her breathing deep and even. Clara's maternal instinct warred with her concern over Erin missing dinner. Tomorrow's early start at 6:30 a.m. for the extra class tipped the scales. Maybe the extra sleep will do her good, Clara reasoned, quietly closing the door. Back in the kitchen, Clara's gaze fell on her phone. She picked it up, her finger hovering over Davis's number. Her husband usually arrived home around 5 p.m., and his absence was adding to her unease. Just as she was about to dial, the familiar sound of his car pulling into the driveway reached her ears. Relief washed over Clara as she made her way to the carport. Davis stepped out of his car, his face etched with the weariness of a long day. "Sorry I'm late," he said, leaning in to kiss her cheek. "There was an issue with one of the construction projects. It's been a day." As they entered the house together, Davis noticed the unusual quiet. "Where's Erin?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. "She went to sleep early," Clara replied, leading him to the kitchen where she began to reheat their dinner. As Davis settled at the table, Clara shared her concerns about Erin's behavior, her words tumbling out in a rush of pent-up worry. Davis listened attentively, his expression thoughtful. After a moment he spoke, his voice calm and reassuring. "It's probably just the adjustment to the new school situation," he reasoned. "Remember how excited she was to join a regular school? Maybe the reality is a bit more challenging than she expected." Clara nodded slowly, finding some comfort in Davis's logical approach. "You're right," she agreed. "She did always say she wanted to be normal like the other kids." "Exactly," Davis said, reaching for Clara's hand across the table. "It's a big change. It'll take time, but she'll adjust. And if it becomes too much, we can always consider moving her back to her previous school." As they ate, the conversation turned to potential solutions. Clara's face lit up as an idea struck her. What if we arrange a play date with her old friends this weekend? A trip to the park could do her good. Davis smiled, nodding his approval. "That's a great idea. It might help her feel more grounded." As they cleared the table, Davis asked about the new extra class teacher. Clara found herself recounting her interactions with Mr. Thomas, noting his friendly demeanor and apparent confidence in Erin's abilities. "It sounds like he really knows his stuff," Davis commented. "Someone with his reputation. I think we can trust that he'll help Erin too. We shouldn't worry too much." As the evening wore on, Clara and Davis fell into their usual routine. They prepared Reuben's evening meal, checked on the still sleeping Erin, and finally retired to their room. Davis reminded Clara of his early shift the next day, grumbling good-naturedly about the demanding client on his current project. "Erin has an early class too," Clara mentioned as they prepared for bed. "I guess we're all calling it an early night." As they settled into bed, Clara found herself staring at the ceiling, her mind still churning with the day's events. Despite Davis's reassurances, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The night stretched on endlessly for Clara, sleep eluding her despite her best efforts. The soft, rhythmic breathing of Davis beside her only emphasized her own restlessness. Every creak of the house, every distant car passing on the street, seemed amplified in the quiet darkness. Unable to find peace in bed, Clara found herself making frequent trips downstairs. Each time she would pause by the dining room, her eyes drawn to the covered plate of food she had left out for Erin. Each time it remained untouched, a silent testament to the unusualness of the day. As she paced the quiet house, Clara's mind kept replaying the moment Erin had flinched away from her touch. It was so unlike her daughter, who had always found comfort in physical contact, relying on it as a way to connect with the world she couldn't see. The memory gnawed at Clara, a persistent ache that wouldn't let her rest. In the early hours of the morning, Clara found herself at the computer, the blue light of the screen casting a ghostly glow in the dark room. She navigated to parental forums, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she searched for answers. She read countless articles about the new government program, finding some solace in the fact that many families seem to be facing similar struggles with the adjustment. As she scrolled through page after page, Clara's eyes grew heavy, but her mind remained alert. She was determined to find some explanation, some reassurance that what they were experiencing was normal. But even as she read about other families' challenges, a nagging feeling persisted. What if Erin's situation was somehow different? When the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Clara admitted defeat in her battle for sleep. She made her way downstairs once more, noting with a heavy heart that the plate of food remained untouched. It was the first time in Erin's life that she had gone a whole night without eating dinner. In the kitchen, Clara went through the motions of making coffee, the familiar routine providing a small comfort. She began preparing an early breakfast for Davis, knowing he would need to leave soon for his early shift. At 5:30 a.m., Davis appeared in the kitchen, looking far more rested than Clara felt. She handed him a wrapped breakfast and a packed lunch, managing a small smile as he kissed her goodbye. "I'll try to come home early today," Davis promised. "Maybe I can spend some quality time with Erin, see if I can figure out what's bothering her." After Davis left, Clara turned her attention to preparing Reuben for the day. As she carefully secured the vest on the dog's chest and adjusted his equipment, her hand brushed against something in the box that held Reuben's belongings. Curious, she reached in and pulled out a small camera. The sight of the device triggered a memory. They had purchased it when they first got Reuben, intending to observe how the dog behaved around Erin when they weren't present. They had never ended up using it, but now as Clara held the camera in her hand, An idea began to form. She pressed the power button for a few seconds, but nothing happened. The battery had long since died. Acting on impulse, Clara found the adapter and set the camera to charge, leaving it on the table as she went to wake Erin. In Erin's room, Clara gently roused her daughter, reminding her of the early class. To her relief, Erin woke easily, mentioning that she was hungry. It was a small thing, but it lifted some of the weight from Clara's heart. As Erin got ready for school, Clara returned to the kitchen, her mind working overtime. The camera on the table seemed to call to her, a potential window into understanding what was happening with her daughter. When she tried the power button again, the device beeped to life. Just then, Erin entered the kitchen, Reuben at her side. "Mom?" Erin's voice was curious. "What's that sound? What are you doing?" Clara felt a pang of guilt at the lie that sprang to her lips. "Oh, just checking a new kitchen timer I bought," she said, forcing lightness into her tone. "Come on, let's get you some breakfast before the bus arrives." The morning unfolded with an air of tension that Clara couldn't quite shake. As she finished securing the camera to Reuben's collar, making sure it was well hidden beneath the dog's fur with only the small lens unobscured by its fur, she felt Erin's unseeing gaze upon her. The weight of her deception sat heavily on her shoulders. "Mum." Erin's voice cut through the silence, tinged with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Why are you taking so long with Reuben? What are you really doing with the new timer?" Clara's heart raced as she scrambled for a plausible explanation. "Oh, I was just checking Reuben's ear," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "I thought I felt a little bump earlier, but it seems fine now." "With the kitchen timer?" Erin asked, and Clara found herself stuttered. "No." "No, Erin, the kitchen timer was another thing. Come on, finish your breakfast." Erin's brow furrowed slightly, but she didn't press further. Clara watched as her daughter's hand found Reuben's fur, fingers running through it in a familiar, comforting gesture. The sight only intensified Clara's guilt, but she steeled herself, reminding herself that this was for Erin's protection. At 6:15 a.m., the low rumble of the school bus engine broke the morning quiet. Clara helped Erin gather her things and guided her to the door. As Erin and Reuben made their way down the path to the waiting bus, Clara stood in the doorway, her heart heavy with worry and hope. Once the bus had disappeared around the corner, Clara returned to the empty house. The silence seemed oppressive now, amplifying her tumultuous thoughts. She found herself reaching for her phone, scrolling through the parental forum where she had posted her concerns the night before. A few replies had come in, offering sympathy and advice, but none that truly eased her mind. The morning crawled by as Clara tried to busy herself with housework, her mind never far from Erin and the hidden camera. Every so often she would check her phone, half expecting, what? A call from the school? A message from Erin? She wasn't sure. At 11 a.m., the shrill ring of her phone cut through the quiet house like a knife. Clara's heart leapt into her throat as she saw the school's number flash on the screen. With trembling fingers, she answered the call. "Mrs. Davis?" The voice of Mrs. Emily West, the school principal, came through clear and concerned. "I'm calling about Erin. She's in my office right now, crying and saying she wants to go home." Clara felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. "What? But the regular school day doesn't end until 12. What happened?" "I'm not entirely sure," Mrs. West replied. "She became very upset during her regular class time, and she refused to talk with me or her teachers. I think it would be best if you came to pick her up." "I'll be right there," Clara said, already moving towards the door. As she drove to the school, her mind raced. Was this related to the math test? Had something happened during the extra class that upset Erin? Clara's fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she remembered the camera hidden in Reuben's collar. Soon she would have answers. The thought both terrified and steeled her. Clara arrived at the school, her mind clouded with worry as she parked her car. She stepped out, her movements brisk and determined, and made her way to the principal's office. Inside, she found Erin sitting quietly, her small figure hunched slightly, her hands resting on Reuben's harness. The golden retriever sat alert by her side, sensing the tension. Erin's face was streaked with tears, and the sight made Clara's heart clench. She knelt beside her daughter, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. "Sweetheart, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" she asked gently. But Erin just shook her head, her lip quivering. She sniffled and buried her face against Reuben's soft fur. Clara swallowed the lump forming in her throat, knowing something was terribly wrong. Helping Erin to her feet, Clara excused herself from the principal's office. Clara guided her and Reuben to the car. In the car, Clara turned to her daughter, tried to coax answers from her. "Erin, please talk to me. Did something happen at school?" But Erin only shook her head again, hugging her arms around herself. Clara's worry deepened with each passing moment. Finally, unable to bear the suspense any longer, Clara pulled into an empty parking lot. "Why are we stopping, Mom? Can we just go home?" she murmured. Clara's gaze flicked to the small camera attached to Reuben's collar, her mind racing. "Sweetheart, we're not going home just yet," Clara said, reaching for the camera on Reuben's collar. "You've been acting strangely, and I need to understand why. I'm going to find out now." With shaking hands, Clara connected the camera to her phone, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Erin could hear it. As the footage began to load, Clara found herself holding her breath, torn between the desperate need to know and the fear of what she might discover. At first, Clara skipped through the recordings of the extra classes, her mind not even considering that something could have happened during that time. She focused instead on the periods before school and during breaks, half expecting to see evidence of bullying or some other form of mistreatment from Erin's peers. But as she scrolled through the footage, she found nothing out of the ordinary. The camera captured snippets of conversation, the rustling of papers, the general bustle of school life, but nothing that explained Erin's distress. Feeling a mix of relief and frustration, Clara then checked the footage from the regular class during the math test. To her surprise, everything seemed normal. In fact, she saw Erin finishing and submitting her quiz before most of her classmates, a small smile of satisfaction on her face as she handed in her paper. Confusion mounting, Clara finally turned her attention to the footage from the extra classes. As the video began to play, her world tilted on its axis. There on the small screen of her phone, she saw Erin sitting on Mr. Thomas's lap. Clara's first instinct was to rationalize it, to tell herself that this must be some unconventional teaching method. But as she continued to watch, her blood ran cold. Mr. Thomas had his arm around Erin's waist, holding her close, and occasionally brushed against her sides. Clara watched in horror as Erin's lips moved, forming what looked like the words, "Please no." Her daughter squirmed, clearly trying to free herself from the teacher's grasp, but Mr. Thomas only tightened his hold, pulling her back onto his lap. Clara felt sick as she saw Mr. Thomas's hand move to stroke Erin's hair, his touch lingering far too long to be appropriate. This was no teaching method. This was a violation of trust, a perversion of the care and protection a teacher should provide. With trembling fingers, Clara paused the recording. She turned to Erin, her voice barely above a whisper. "Honey, did Mr. Thomas do something to make you uncomfortable?" Erin hesitated, her unseeing eyes wide with fear. Clara pressed gently. "It's okay, sweetheart." "I won't be angry. I just need you to tell me the truth. I love you, and I don't want you to feel alone." At those words, the dam broke. Erin burst into tears, nodding vigorously. "Yes," she sobbed, her small body shaking with the force of her cries. Clara felt as if her heart was being torn from her chest. She gathered Erin into her arms, holding her tightly as her own tears began to fall. "Oh, my baby," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." As she held her daughter, Clara's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. Reuben's aggression toward the man, Erin's sudden aversion to touch, her subdued behavior, her reluctance to talk about school. How could she have missed the signs? Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She needed to be strong for Erin now, to be the pillar of support her daughter so desperately needed. With gentle hands, she wiped the tears from Erin's cheeks, her touch as light as a feather. "Sweetheart," Clara began, her voice soft but firm, "I need you to tell me if this is why you were so upset yesterday after school too. Did something happen then as well?" Erin nodded slowly, her bottom lip trembling. "Yes," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the car's idle engine. Clara closed her eyes for a moment, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. The realization that this had been going on, that her daughter had been suffering in silence, was almost too much to bear. With every thought passing in Clara's mind, anger began to simmer beneath her grief and guilt. Anger at Mr. Thomas for betraying their trust so horrifically, and even lying at her face yesterday. Anger at herself for not realizing sooner, and anger at a system that had allowed this to happen. Looking into Erin's tear-stained face, Clara said, "Erin, listen to me," her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "What Mr. Thomas did was wrong. It was not your fault. Do you understand?" Erin nodded, hiccuping slightly as her sobs subsided. Clara reached for her phone again. "I'm going to call your father," she said, her fingers already dialing Davis's number. "He needs to know about this, and we need to go back to the school right away." As the phone rang, Clara kept one hand on Erin's shoulder, a constant reassurance of her presence and support. She flinched at first, but then she sank into Clara's warmth. When Davis answered, his voice cheerful and unaware, Clara's words came out in a rush. "Davis, you need to come to the school right now," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "It's about Erin. It's Mr. Thomas. He's been touching her inappropriately." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end of the line before Davis's voice came back, low and dangerous. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. As Clara ended the call, she turned back to Erin. "We're going back to the school now, honey," she explained gently. "We need to talk to the principal and make sure Mr. Thomas can't hurt you or any other children ever again." Erin's face crumpled in fear. "Do we have to?" she asked, her voice small and frightened. Clara's heart ached at her daughter's distress, but she knew they had to act. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, running a comforting hand through Erin's hair. "I know it's scary, but we need to be brave. Remember, you've done nothing wrong, so you don't have to be afraid. We're going to make sure you're safe." With that, Clara started the car, her mind already formulating what she would say to the principal. As they drove back towards the school, she kept glancing in the rear-view mirror at Erin, who sat quietly in the back seat, her hand buried in Reuben's fur. The familiar buildings of the school came into view all too soon. Clara parked the car and took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. She helped Erin out of the car, keeping a protective arm around her shoulders as they walked towards the entrance. Clara rushed into the school, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. Erin clung to her side, Reuben faithfully leading the way. As they approached Mr. Thomas's staff office, Clara could hear muffled voices from within. Without hesitation, she pushed the door open. The scene that greeted them was unexpected. Mr. Thomas sat behind his desk, his posture relaxed as he conversed with two parents. A daughter, whom Clara vaguely recognized as another student with special needs, sat quietly in a chair near the wall, idly swinging their legs. For a brief moment, the normalcy of the scene made Clara falter. Doubt crept in, whispering that perhaps she had misunderstood, that the damning footage she'd witnessed was somehow a terrible mistake. But then her eyes locked with Mr. Thomas's, and she saw it, a flicker of panic, quickly masked but unmistakable when the teacher looked at Erin. In that instant, her resolve hardened, anger surging through her veins like molten steel. "How dare you?" Clara's voice cut through the room, low and trembling with barely contained fury. The conversation halted abruptly, all eyes turning to her. "How dare you touch my daughter?" The silence that followed her accusation was deafening. Mr. Thomas's face underwent a rapid series of transformations, surprise melting into panic, then anger, before finally settling into a mask of confused indignation. He cleared his throat, his voice carefully modulated as he spoke. "Mrs. Davis," he began, his tone placating, "I don't understand what you're talking about. Perhaps we should discuss this in private." "No," Clara interrupted, her voice gaining strength. "We'll discuss it right here, right now. I have proof of what you've been doing to Erin during your special classes." The other parents in the room exchanged bewildered glances. The woman with greying hair slowly rose from her chair, her face a mixture of confusion and growing anger. "What on earth is going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "Mr. Thomas is an excellent teacher. How dare you barge in here making such accusations?" Clara stood her ground, her arm tightening protectively around Erin's shoulders. She could feel her daughter trembling slightly against her side, and it only fueled her determination. "I have video evidence," she stated, her voice low but clear, "of this man inappropriately touching my daughter." The room erupted into chaos. The parents began shouting, their words overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. Mr. Thomas pushed back from his desk, his chair scraping loudly against the floor as he stood. His face had flushed a deep red, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. "This is preposterous," he sputtered, his composure cracking. "I would never. I have dedicated my life to helping children with special needs. These accusations are insane." Just as the situation threatened to spiral out of control, the door burst open once more. Principal West rushed in, her eyes wide as she took in the scene before her. "What is going on here?" she demanded, her authoritative voice cutting through the din. Clara turned to the principal, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Mrs. West, we have evidence that Mr. Thomas has been touching our daughter during his special classes." The principal's face paled visibly, her gaze darting between Clara and Mr. Thomas. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the tension palpable in the air. Clara could hear Erin's rapid breathing beside her, feel the slight tremors running through her daughter's body. Reuben pressed closer, as if sensing the need to protect. Mr. Thomas's composure finally shattered completely. With a sudden movement that made everyone flinch, he lunged forward, his hand closing around Clara's arm. His fingers dug into her skin as he hissed, his eyes wild with desperation, trying to get into the camera that she held in her arms. "You can't prove anything. You're making this up. I'll sue you for defamation. Erin is confused. She doesn't understand." The door slammed open with such force that it bounced off the wall. Davis, Erin's father, burst into the room, his face a mask of fury as he took in the scene, Mr. Thomas's hand gripping Clara's arm, Erin shrinking back in fear. Without hesitation, Davis surged forward, his hands connected with Mr. Thomas's chest, shoving the teacher back with such force that he stumbled, his legs hitting the desk behind him. Mr. Thomas's grip on Clara's arm broke as he flailed, trying to regain his balance. "Don't you dare touch my wife," Davis growled, his voice low and dangerous. He positioned himself protectively in front of Clara and Erin, his body tense and ready for further confrontation. "And don't you ever speak about my daughter again." The room fell into a stunned silence. Clara could hear her own ragged breathing, feel the rapid rise and fall of Erin's chest against her side. Reuben stood alert, his body angled protectively in front of them. The air was thick with tension, the weight of unspoken accusations and dawning realizations hanging heavy over everyone present. In that moment, as Clara met Davis's eyes over Erin's head, she felt a renewed sense of strength. Despite the horror of the situation, the long and difficult road that lay ahead, she knew they would face it together. For Erin, for justice, and for all the other potential victims who had suffered in silence, they would see this through to the end. The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Clara could feel Erin pressing against her side, Reuben standing protectively in front of them both. Mrs. West's face paled. She looked from Clara to Mr. Thomas, clearly struggling to process the information. "Let's everyone calm down. These are very serious accusations," she said slowly. "We need to handle this carefully. Perhaps we should move this discussion to my office." "No," Clara insisted. "We're not going anywhere." She turned back to Mr. Thomas, who was now visibly sweating. "I have proof right here," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Footage from a camera hidden on Reuben's collar. It shows everything." Mrs. West stepped forward, her face grave. "Mrs. Davis, may I see this footage?" Clara's nodded. Her hands trembled as she pressed play on the recording. Gasps spread through the parents like wildfire, their faces shifting from confusion to shock, then to outrage. The principal turned ghostly pale as she watched. When the video ended, Mrs. West looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of shock and determination. "I'm calling the police," she said firmly. "Mr. Thomas, you are to remain here until they arrive. Everyone else, please step outside." But the moment Mr. Thomas realized the severity of the situation, he bolted from his chair, attempting to flee toward the door. The two parents shrieked in alarm, but before he could get far, Davis stepped forward, blocking his path. "One wrong move and you'll regret it," Davis growled, his voice low and filled with venom. "You think you can just walk away from this? From what you did to my daughter, and who knows how many others?" His fists clenched, his whole body radiating barely contained fury. Mr. Thomas hesitated, glancing around the room, sweat beading at his temple. But before he could react further, the sound of sirens filled the air. Within moments, uniformed officers entered the office, their presence sending a ripple of relief through the group. "Mr. Thomas," one of the officers announced, stepping forward, "you're under arrest." The teacher stiffened as the officers moved in, cuffing his hands behind his back. As they filed out of the office, Clara could see the dawning realization on the faces of the parents. The woman who had defended Mr. Thomas earlier now looked sick, her arms wrapped protectively around her child. In the hallway, Davis pulled Clara and Erin close, enveloping them in a tight embrace. "It's going to be okay," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to get through this together." Clara nodded against his chest, feeling a mix of relief, anger, and overwhelming sadness. As they stood there, holding each other, they could hear the distant wail of police sirens approaching. The nightmare wasn't over, but at least now the truth was out. Justice would be served, and Erin, along with who knew how many other children, would finally be safe from Mr. Thomas's predatory behavior. The parking lot of the school had transformed into a scene of controlled chaos. Police cars with flashing lights were parked haphazardly, their presence drawing curious onlookers from nearby passerby. Officers moved with purpose, some entering the school while others cordoned off the area with yellow tape. Clara, Davis, and Erin stood near the police car, Reuben faithfully at their side. They watched as two officers escorted Mr. Thomas out of the building, his hands cuffed behind his back. The once respected teacher looked small and defeated, his head bowed as he was led into the squad car. One of the officers turned to him. "Listen, we already have evidence, but if you confess now, it could work in your favor." His voice was smooth, calculated, a carefully placed lie. Mr. Thomas sneered, his composure unraveling. "You people act like I did something wrong," he scoffed. "I've been teaching for years. A teacher has the right to educate however they see fit." His words sent a chill through the gathered crowd. "What exactly do you mean by that?" another officer prodded. Mr. Thomas exhaled sharply. "The kids always enjoyed my classes," he said, his tone almost nostalgic. "I rewarded them for good grades, carrying them on my shoulders, letting them sit on my lap. The girls loved the attention. I even made a game out of it, taking pictures and picking the prettiest ones for a special kiss reward." A collective gasp filled the air. Clara felt bile rise in her throat, her grip tightening around Erin. Davis's face twisted in fury, and he looked ready to lunge at the man, if not for the officers restraining him. You preyed on children with disabilities," the mother whispered in horror, her voice breaking. Mr. Thomas merely shrugged. "They're easy to guide, they trust their teachers." That was the last straw. The officers didn't need to hear another word. Without hesitation, they shoved him into the back of the squad car, slamming the door behind him. "We'll need statements from all of you," an officer said, turning to the group, "and access to any additional evidence you have." Clara nodded numbly, reaching into her purse and pulling out the small memory card she had taken from the hidden camera earlier that morning. "This," she said, handing it over. "It has everything." The officer accepted it with a nod. "We'll examine this back at the station. We'd like you all to come in as well." Principal West emerged shortly after, her face drawn and tired. She made her way over to the family, her steps heavy with the weight of the day's events. "Mr. and Mrs. Davis," she began, her voice low and serious, "I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for what has happened. We will cooperate fully with the police investigation and do everything in our power to support Erin and any other affected students." Clara nodded, her arm tightening around Erin's shoulders. "Thank you, Mrs. West. We appreciate your quick action once you saw the evidence." The sound of Erin's quiet sniffling brought Clara back to the present. She knelt down, pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "It's over now, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You were so brave. Because of you, he can't hurt anyone else ever again." As they held each other, Clara's gaze met Davis's over Erin's head. In his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own tumultuous emotions: anger, grief, guilt, but also determination. They had a long road ahead of them, helping Erin heal from this trauma and ensuring that justice was served. But they would face it together, as a family. Clara, Erin and Reuben climbed into their car, following behind the police. Davis got into his own vehicle, his grip still iron-tight on the steering wheel. No one spoke during the drive. The weight of what had just unfolded sat heavy on their shoulders. As they drove, Clara's mind raced with a flood of emotions. Relief that they had caught him, horror at what could have happened if she hadn't found that camera in time, and a deep, aching sorrow for the children who had suffered in silence. No matter how much parents tried to protect their kids, there would always be people in the world capable of breaking that trust. She glanced at Erin through the rearview mirror, seeing the way her daughter clung to Reuben's hand for comfort. Clara would make sure Erin never felt alone again. That night, she would write about this on her forum. Not just the horror of it, but the lessons learned, the importance of vigilance, of believing children when they say something feels wrong, of never assuming that just because someone is a teacher, they can be trusted blindly. Because if she had learned one thing today, it was this: evil often wears a familiar face, and it was up to parents like her to recognize it before it was too late.